So this is just completely insane. Obviously, British Columbians and Canadians across the country are getting taken to the cleaners by these record high gas prices, and just as importantly, record high gas taxes.
Gas prices have skyrocketed across the country, especially in the province I'm in British Columbia. But can all of that be blamed on the war in Ukraine? I'm Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and who better to interview about that than Aaron Gunn, the political commentator and producer of the documentary called Why Are Gas Prices So Expensive? Before I jump to that, if you appreciate at Rebel News, we bring you the other side of the story. You can support our independent journalism by subscribing and signing up for exclusive content from us on current events. You can do so by quickly opening up another screen on your phone or your device and head to rebelnewsplus.com. Now, one of the things that you've done so well over the years is been an advocate for the taxpayers. So I bet that's kept you really busy now with the taxes that we're seeing and the rise in gas prices. We're standing at a Chevron in Vancouver right now, and gas is close to $2 a liter. But in British Columbia, we've seen it well over that. I know close to me it was around $2.11. What's the highest you've seen?
Well, I heard it was 222 earlier last week. So this is just completely insane. Obviously, British Columbians and Canadians across the country are getting taken to the cleaners by these record high gas prices, and just as importantly, record high gas taxes.
Now, previously, when something went bad, it was blame Trump and move on. Now there are some concerning things, obviously, with the war happening in Ukraine. But how much of this spike in gas can we attribute to that versus a long time coming?
Well, people and our politicians are just trying to blame the price of oil, but of course, the price of oil has been this high before. The difference this time is just how much higher gas taxes are. So yes, when you see these swings, a lot of the time that has to do with the price of oil. But the reason why they're swinging so high now, like in between $1.80 and $2 in the case of BC, is record high gas taxes. In British Columbia, 74 cents of every liter you fill up in gas goes to taxes, whether it's the carbon tax, federal excise tax, provincial excise tax. They all add up to over 70 cents a liter. And what's even crazier, Drea, is on April 1st, governments, the Trudeau government, are going to increase the carbon tax again by 25%.
This is mind-boggling to me, and it adds up, especially for the working class family, whether that's your children's extracurricular activities, that vacation that you really wanted. Now, how could this have been avoided? What do you think we should have done, maybe with our resources or finding another way to support things?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. One, the carbon tax is a huge disaster. It's punishing everyday British Columbians and Canadians for driving themselves to work or their kids to school. So the carbon tax should have never been introduced, and it should be scrapped. Number two, we need to be able to get our oil. Canada has the third largest oil reserves in the world, to the places in the country that need it. Here in British Columbia, we're short of crude oil. In fact, sometimes we rely on Russian crude to supply the U.S. refineries that refine our gasoline. And that's because we haven't been able to build the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, and we canceled the Northern Gateway pipeline. So those need to be built. We also have to get Energy East built so we can get our oil to the East Coast instead of importing dirty Saudi oil and Venezuelan oil in New Brunswick and Quebec. So these are the policies that we should have had the foresight to implement, but instead we've been going the exact opposite direction, keeping Canadian resources in the ground and importing oil instead from overseas despotic, autocratic regimes.
What you said there reminds me of this meme I saw. I'll put it on the screen right now, and it mentions America. They're in a very similar situation as us. What do you think is going on here? Why wouldn't we want as a country to see ourselves more self-sufficient, and why wouldn't we use this example of the war as an opportunity to do that?
I think I think there's a couple reasons. Number one, you have this kind of green hysteria and green energy industry lobby that has been trying to advocate for keeping Canadian oil in the ground. And they look around the world, they look at Russia, Venezuela, Iran. They want to keep oil in the ground, and we are perceived to be the weakest link. So they send all of their foreign funding dollars from the United States up here to campaign to block our pipelines, to basically blockade Canadian resources from reaching Tidewater. and which they've been very successful in doing. So I think now that we're seeing the results of these policies play out in real time with near $2 a liter gas and over $2 a liter diesel, and people are starting to ask questions, and they're uncomfortable questions. A perfect example is in the United States, where you have the president down there talking about trying to import Venezuelan oil, trying to import Iranian oil. This is a president and an administration that torpedoed the Keystone XL pipeline that would have brought Canadian oil down to U.S. Gulf refineries. So, of course, this doesn't make any sense, but it's a perfect example of how kind of these failed and ideological policies are coming home to roost.
Now, this might be a question for a whole nother report, but for someone who maybe isn't so in tune with how gas prices come to be, I guess that's my question. Who decides what the gas prices are from a day-to-day schedule?
So there's a couple different components. The price of oil, crude oil, is a primary input that is traded in global markets. So people around the world are trading, individual traders, governments, speculators, all sorts of things. That's the price of oil. And you see there's the Western Canadian Select, Brent, there's all these different markets depending on where the oil is. And of course, those can ship around the world in those big tanker ships. Sometimes you can follow those tanker ships in the middle of the ocean. You can actually see them turn around and change their destination based on bid prices. That oil goes to feed refineries. Refineries obviously produce gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, all these kinds of things, which are secondary products, which have their own supply and demand. So sometimes you'll see prices spike in certain locations like BC if a refinery goes down because of a flood or scheduled maintenance or whatever the case may be, or as in the case recently, sometimes if a refinery can't secure an adequate amount of crude. And lastly, on top of all that, once you get your kind of price for the gasoline, you've got your taxes on top of that. So that in the case of BC is where you get your 74 cents a liter. In other provinces, it's not quite that high, but it's still around 50, 60 cents a liter.
Well, you certainly know your stuff. What advice do you have for Canadians, maybe even British Columbians specifically, who are not buying the narrative with these increases and are worried and say enough is enough? What do you think they should be doing?
Well, I think the number one thing is obviously we live in a democracy, so you have to hold our politicians accountable. And the one important thing I want people to remember is you're paying these high prices when you go to fill up your car or your truck after driving yourself to work or your kids to school. But you're also paying for those high prices whenever you purchase any good or product in society that was made or transported using oil and gas. And that's what the important thing is. I think over the coming months, you're going to see inflation, which is already beginning to get out of control, to continue to skyrocket. And when that happens, don't forget who you should be thanking, which is our politicians in Ottawa and our politicians in British Columbia, which together have let the situation get completely out of control.
Let us know in the comments below if prices for gas continue to climb. What are some of the cutbacks your family is going to have to take? And if you haven't done so already, grab your prescription of exclusive content from the Rebels here at rebelnewsplus.com.